I am forced into speech because men of science have refused to follow my advice without knowing why. It is altogether against my will that I tell my reasons for opposing this contemplated invasion of the Antarctic, with its vast fossil hunt and its wholesale boring and melting of the ancient ice cap, and I am the more reluctant because my warning may be in vain. Doubt of the real facts, as I must reveal them, is inevitable. Yet if I suppressed what will seem extravagant and incredible, there would be nothing left. In the end, I must rely on the judgment and standing of the few scientific leaders who have, on the one hand, sufficient independence of thought to weigh my data on its own hideously convincing merits, or in the light of certain primordial and highly baffling myth cycles, and on the other hand, sufficient influence to deter the exploring world in general from any rash and overambitious program in the region of those mountains of madness.
Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite books of all time, one of my recent favorite books of all time. I call it a book. Some people call it a novella. I call it a book. We're going to be talking about At the Mountains of Madness. This is one, like I said, one of my favorites. I'm going to be talking with my buddy Steve here, who I bought him a copy of it for Christmas because I knew it. I love that. I knew it appealed to all of his sensibilities, and I was surprised that he hasn't read it yet. And when I ordered it and sent it to him, the whole time I'm like, God, I hope he hasn't read it yet. So, for those of you that don't know, the at the Mountains of Madness, if you've been living under a rock, Mountains of Madness was written by H.P. Lovecraft. We're not going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft. We're going to talk about the book. It was written around 1930-31, got rejected by Weird Tales because it was too long. Around 36, it got published in a different magazine, serialized, and then since then has been produced in so many different collections on its own. Like the copy I got you was pretty much it's self-contained. I have the what is it? The American Press paperback or whatever it's called, which the fancy one with all the annotations and stuff. But I don't read annotations because I'm not a book snob. Come at me in the comments if you think I'm out of line. I don't care. Anyway, basically, Mountains of Madness covers like a 1930s expedition to the Antarctic, which hadn't been completely explored then. So there was lots of room for the fantastic. Edgar Rice Burroughs touched on it quite a bit. Marvel Comics later, even though it was pretty much explored. They borrowed heavily from Lovecraft and Burroughs to create some of their stuff. The story basically details the expedition to the Antarctic, where looking for fossils and minerals and stuff in which to plunder, and the mission goes sideways when an advanced scouting group finds some interesting fossils in a cave, which don't turn out to be fossils, at least not for too long. And from there, another part, rest of the guys like, you know what, we're going back to the boats. Well, our narrator and his buddy head off to find out what was going on, and cosmic horrible wackiness ensues. They find this they find this ancient city that's like the size of like a country. They explore it at length. Something bad happens, and they hightail it out of the ruins and get back to when they get back to the world. They're like, it was a terrible windstorm. It's too dangerous. And then when the narrator, Danforth, I think his name is, when he finds out that there's going to be another expedition, he's like, all right, screw it. I'm going to tell you guys exactly why you shouldn't do it. And we all know when you tell people to not do something, what people do.
They
So
always don't do it.
they always listen. It's like a Godzilla movie. They always listen to the scientists. But I'm not gonna go too much more into it because I've talked quite a bit about it here. Uh, but what I want to talk with you, Steve, about this book.
There will be spoilers.
Yes, spoilers for this 100-year-old book.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons why I'm not too worried about spoilers today. If you haven't read the book, hit pause, go read the book. And it's what if you're like, oh, but Lovecraft is so dense, it's hard to read Lovecraft. Well, this was one of his more accessible ones, I think. There are sections of the book where it's like, and we'll get into format here in a minute, but there are sections that are still pretty dense and like I have at least one example of where he uses 85 words or so to say something he could have said in 3.
Yes.
But then he wouldn't be Lovecraft if he didn't
Yes.
do that, right?
I
I know
he used what we refer to as purple prose.
Purple prose. Got it.
Yep.
Got it. People who know me know I love to stretch an analogy until it's, within an inch of its life. This is like if you combined Endurance, the Shackleton story, with the Blair Witch Project.
That's not a bad. That's not a bad comparison. Yeah, Lovecraft, by the way, was obsessed with what was going on down there at the time. He read everything he could get his hands on about it, which is why I think there's so much accuracy to it.
He references the Byrd Exposition. He references the Shackleton Expedition and by the way, it was interesting to read because it's a contemporary account. Well, yeah, maybe 15, 20 years after. Yeah. But he doesn't say the doomed expedition or anything like that. He's like the expedition.
Yeah.
So apparently people at the time didn't think of it as, oh, what a tragedy. Well, it wasn't really a tragedy. They didn't make it all the way, but everybody got out alive. That's a different show. Go check that out. Anyway, so the first part of the book, absolutely loved, because it has that feel of really good historical fiction.
Yeah.
Where he's given enough details and he talks about like them leaving Boston and going through the Panama Canal and having their last port of call before they go down, and he describes the Antarctic coastline and the ice and all that stuff. It was really cool.
I think grounding it in reality so much the way he did for a good chunk of the book is what you need for what comes next.
Yeah.
For instance, another thing I like about it is he lays into like the technical stuff. Now this is state of the art technology for 1930. Some of which is even above and beyond that, like the drill apparatus that they're using to get fossils.
Mm-hmm.
That's like everything they're doing is like the peak of what humans have at that time.
Yeah.
And it makes the second half really show how insignificant it all is.
Yes.
It's like here we are with our fancy drills and our our boats and our our aerial planes, and these guys go to this place where it's light years beyond anything we could possibly imagine.
If you like, as I do, these Antarctic expedition type books, this one was good because it's a little later than the Shackleton one. So the idea of using airplanes, the idea of taking 5 airplanes with you on a boat and then putting them all together on the ice sheet, and then knowing that you can land anywhere because it's all like there's a bunch of ice, flat ice and stuff.
There's plenty of places to land.
It was just really cool, like that. Yeah, state of the art, right? The airplane had just been invented 20 years before, 25 years before, so they were able to. That was state of the art at the time, right? And how would you use an airplane to explore the Antarctica was really awesome. So the second reason I'm not worried about spoilers, the first one was, I mean, it's 1936. If you haven't had a chance to read it by now, I don't know if you're going to. But
I don't care what you think about the man, which we'll get. I want to talk about the impact of this book later. So remind me.
All right. I'll also remind you is Professor Dyer is the main guy. Danforth is the guy that
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, goes nuts on the
Yeah.
way back. He's the pilot
Yeah.
and his co-explorer who saw something, thought he saw something, or just the weight of what they actually saw really fell upon him. And it, you know what I compare it to at the end? So those are, Paul says something bad happens at the end. Yes, something bad happens at the end. And in true Lovecraftian fashion, the point was, this is kind of the point Lovecraft tried to make in his writings is we as humans think we're all that, but compared, and this is relativity had been discovered or had been described recently, and we're learning all sorts of stuff about the cosmos and the universe and discovering other galaxies, and telescope technology is getting better. Everything in the popular press is just starting to show we've just gone through the second industrial revolution where it's like, oh, we're finally taming the earth, and now sort of like, are we that significant? And so his whole point is man is just a blip on the screen in the long line of the cosmos, right?
And to add insult to injury, man was created either by accident or for a joke.
Yes. Yes.
There's like one little line in that book that just like upsets a lot of people. It's like,
Yeah.
and one of that's why this appeals to me. I have a very small opinion of myself in relation to the universe, and I'm fine with that. And this really, so much of this story sings to how I feel about a lot of things.
So the whatever it is that Danforth, the pilot, saw or thought he saw or perceived or whatever hit him all at once to cause him to lose his mind was basically the total perspective vortex from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
Which those of you who haven't read it, it's this thing that they decided would be a good way to punish people who had committed really heinous crimes. They put you in this sort of virtual reality box, and they show you your significance in relation to the entire universe across space and time.
Yeah.
And it, like, nobody survives it. Like, everybody just goes absolutely mad. Again, spoiler alert. Yeah. Except the one guy, one of the main characters of the book, doesn't go absolutely mad, but Danforth did. Maybe Dyer's like the Zaphod Beeblebrox of
I was gonna say
Lovecraft.
The only person that could survive that would be Zaphod.
I see this as almost three different. Obviously, there's an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Act 1 is the exploring, and it's really cool how it's like they have this new drilling apparatus and they're discovering things that haven't been discovered. And one guy's like, oh, that's just natural formations. And another guy's like, wait a minute. I don't think this is natural in that term. Yeah. Not only is it not natural, it's not earthly because of the timeline.
Yeah.
They figured out these things are so old. If they are the result of life hadn't had time to evolve yet. And they start, because it was like millions and millions of years ago, there wasn't organic matter yet on Earth. Yeah. When we can date these particular things, right? Yeah. So they're like many hundreds of millions of years old, but it appears like they were made through artificial means.
Yes.
Put it that way.
Yeah. I guess it was like the old ones or the elder things like showed up around the time the moon was made.
Yep.
So they've been around a while.
Yeah.
Speaking of the drilling apparatus, one of the things I absolutely love, I can tell you, with my father has ran a small engine repair business for almost 50 years. He's thinking about retiring. He's 87. He's thinking about retiring. When I tell you that we've had every manner of machine come across his workbench, Pabodi sounds like an absolute name for some sort of heavy machinery.
It's just a full start.
I can literally see it, like see the emblem on these machines. It's that grounded to me.
Pabodi.
Yeah, fire up the Pabodi.
Okay, can I talk just for a minute about the format of the book?
Absolutely.
And by format, what I mean is probably structure.
Sure.
I found it interesting because that's the other reason that I'm not worried about spoilers. The book spoils itself. I mean, I haven't read Lovecraft for reasons I mentioned earlier, but I don't know if he normally does this, but he gives away he doesn't foreshadow, man. He foretells. Like he
Yeah.
just, you know, something bad's going to happen because he
It's how
says
you
it.
get it's how
The
you get the
narrator
reader
says
to
it.
read it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know that the really bad thing that's going to happen is some indication that it's not just your expedition might get killed. It's like the whole world might come to an end, you know?
It is very apocalyptic, and that's one more thing I love about it.
And he doesn't build suspense toward it. In my, that was my issue was like, okay, I'm not in suspense. Let's just get to it. Let's just get to the thing that you think's gonna. It was really cool. The exploration. That was the other thing about the structure of the book. Very expositional. Like when they were exploring the murals that told the history of the beings who built the city, it's like that whole section of the book, the action just comes to a halt, right?
Yeah.
You know there's action. You know that they're copying things down and they're taking pictures and stuff, but the action just comes to a halt and he says, okay, let me tell you all about this city and the history of the beings and stuff. I'm like, that was interesting. That was cool. It's just there's no action. Like there's nothing driving the story forward.
Well, the way that works for me and a lot of people who have read more of his stuff is this book is written further along. I think he died in 37, so he'd been writing for several years since then, before then, and like this book is like his Dark Tower from Stephen King. It just ties, which by the way, there would be no Stephen King without Lovecraft, but I digress. It ties everything together. It name drops so many characters and creatures and events that have happened before this that you're reading it, it's like you have an aha moment. You're like, so one of the things I love about this story, and this probably is my favorite Lovecraft story. The lurking fear is probably my tied with this, but it's a short story. Anyway, Madness pretty much ties a whole bunch of these stories together, and it's an absolute science fiction horror. Science fiction is like it's a breeding ground. It's a petri dish for horror. And the thing I wonder is, because this is very science fiction now, a lot of Lovecraft stuff, including stuff that deals with, Cthulhu and the Necronomicon and a whole bunch of his other stuff, even Lurking Fear, is a lot of it is very supernatural. But when you're reading this book and you're finding out that this stuff is why this stuff exists, I'm like, so it's not even supernatural. All this stuff is alien, alien. And that's what point. I love about it.
So I'm famous for watching and consuming the sequels to stuff before I consume the originals.
It's true.
So that's what I've done here. Like I'm reading through it going, I wonder if, and I didn't really know when it was written until I was already 3/4 of the way through the book. I'm like, I wonder if this is where he introduces Cthulhu. I wonder if this is where he introduces the Elder Ones. And I'm like, no. They've been introduced, exist, told about, and everything. To your point, which I didn't know until about a minute and a half ago.
Well, I'm here.
Things that seemed supernatural and we're kind of like, oh, it just appeared. This monster just exists. And isn't that scary, right? He's like, I'm going to tell everybody they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They exist in the universe. And there's a scientific explanation, not only for why they exist, but for why we exist. Yeah. And I loved that. I loved that about it too. Like I was like, it really had that plausible. It was all plausible. There was no hand waving. There was no, and then magic happened. And then, it was like they read in the murals on the wall. Like this wasn't them speculating. It's like, no, it was all written down.
Don't get me wrong. I love the supernatural and the supernormal, but the fact that they tied it into the what I call science reality makes, a good chunk of that just better for me. Now, of course, if I'm wrong, you know where to go and let me know, and I'll let you know how I feel about it.
It's only human natural.
That's right.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Good book. I did think it was the thing you said in the beginning. It made it funny for me that he's like, all right, I wasn't going to tell you this, but now that I know you're thinking about going to Antarctica, I need to keep you from actually going.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and tell you this.
Yep.
Super interesting, super fascinating. And I know you're an explorer and you like to find new things that nobody else has seen. We found a city that's as big as a country. We were only able to explore a tiny, tiny bit of it. There's probably a
Yeah.
lot more there that we didn't even find.
Yeah.
So, but there might be a monster that drove our guy crazy. But he it drove him crazy. It didn't drive me crazy. It seemed a little bit scary. I'd be guessing as to what it might have been. So there might be a whole other life form down there too. So in other words, don't go.
Yeah. Yeah. And right. And I love how, I mean, he's like, all right, you already think I'm crazy. What do I got to lose?
Yeah.
The other thing I like the mounting the mounting level of like threat,
Yeah.
because at first,
Good point.
you find the elder things, and they're the most scariest things in the world. And then what a neat aspect of them is the was it Dyer, they figure out that like these guys are just essentially people,
Yeah.
and they're just curious, which is why they did what they did to the people that found them. So they're doing the same thing to us that we would
Yes.
do to like a new fish,
Not only that we would do, but that they did do. Like
Yes, yes. It's like it's almost an eye for an eye, except the
and
elder
not in
things
an
have more
vengeful,
eyes.
like it was just interesting. Like they used the scientific instruments and
Hmm.
they're just like curious. Like, what is this thing? We've never
Hmm.
seen this
Hmm.
organism before.
Right.
And so they dissect it and all this stuff. And
Yep.
then these things thaw out and come back to life. And the dogs attack them and
Hmm.
they're like defend themselves. And then they're like, okay, ooh, what is this? This is a thing we've never seen before. Let's study it. Let's explore it. Let's bring part of it. Let's bring one back to the cave. You know.
Yeah.
Uh,
So then they find them. They find the remains of the missing,
mm,
some of the missing party, and that's terrifying because that means the elder things are just they're terrifying. And then they find the thing that basically killed the elder things,
yeah.
and that's worse. And then they find the thing that's scarier beyond that. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just stop going there. Just
Yeah.
come home.
Yeah. I think that's probably the thing that I was too arrogant in the beginning, thinking, well, he's trying to get them not to go because there are these things there, the elder ones that'll kill
Yeah,
you if
yeah.
you go there. Well, most expeditions are going to be like, well, they won't kill us because we'll be ready. We'll have weapons
Hmm.
and stuff. We'll be ready. And so I was like, I don't get why he's even thinking people wouldn't go. It was the
Hmm.
end where
Yeah,
it's like you might awaken something that like would be like a nuclear
yeah.
holocaust.
And
It was,
and I love the fact that since this is really since it finally got published like a year before he died, it's like a nice cap
yeah.
that basically says, "That's it.
I,
the world as we
he's like,
know it is
I'm
done."
done. Do you
Yeah.
uh do you think now I know you said we're not talking about Lovecraft, but do you think he was sort of a Luddite? Do you think he had sort of a we need to stop messing with technology? Because by that time, I'm not sure how well known it was that uh, theory of relativity had come out, E equals MC squared had come out.
Hmm.
World War II had not started in Europe. Uh, the Nazis hadn't even come to power yet in
Hmm.
1930. By the time it was published, they had, but there probably wasn't talk of a nuclear weapon, is what I'm trying to say. But
Yeah.
do you think he sort of saw the way technology was going? Was he kind of a Luddite? Was he trying to rail against
Huh.
human progress?
I know he was scared of everything.
Okay.
I mean, it was his he was scared of doctors,
Oh,
which led to his undoing. So I'm going to say probably a little bit of that is yes.
okay.
There is talk amongst Lovecraftian fans that at the age in which he wrote this, because he died at like 43 or something like that. Now he was he was a xenophobe. He had some contemporaries who were, uh, by today's standards, or any standard racist, but even they were like, bro,
Mhm.
pump the brakes a little bit, pump the brakes a little bit. But the thing what he did was with this book being as it was the last 4 or 5 years of his life, like maybe he had some kind of epiphany because the way he was detailing the thought processes in the elder things about how they basically making them like us, is either
Yeah.
maybe he had an epiphany that maybe people are the same,
Mm.
or
Mm.
maybe it was we all suck. My opinion, it's either or. I like to lean towards the former, but it's probably the latter.
Like a
Let me know down below if I'm wrong.
Sort of a deathbed confession.
Yeah.
I like the idea of grading racists on a curve. It's like when somebody's like, yeah, she's a Scranton 8, but she'd be like a New York 6.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
like
yes.
it's sort of like, he had some friends who would have been like a 2025 9 on the racist scale. But for 1936 they would have been like a 7.
Right.
But
right.
he was a 10 back then, which would make him off the charts in 2025, right?
Yeah.
What does this mean? To Kelly Lee.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
That's well, according to the story, it's from a Edgar Allan Poe story. It's the something of Henry Pym or something. It's a like the only novel Poe ever wrote, because Lovecraft was a huge Poe fan. I've never read it, but I think if I remember the way the story plays out, and I mean I've only read it about 11 times. The way the story plays out is the Shuggoth.
Yeah.
Since they're basically a mockery of a life form or whatever you want to call it, and they mimic what they hear, which I think is great because if you've ever seen the movie The Relic, which I guess was The Ruins. If you've ever seen The Ruins, which I think was also a book, there's this Aztec temple and there's this flower that grows down deep in it, and it's a carnivorous plant. And it learns like this was back in the days of like flip phones. It learns how to do the little beep 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 jingle like to lure people down. Who's calling down there?
It's like a mockingjay.
Yeah, yes, like a mockingjay. So yeah, basically the Shuggoth, since they're a mockery of a life form, even though they built the entire civilization, they were viewed as less than, and I think that's kind of a point as they're the only brain pan they have is to imitate, and get told what to do and bite the heads off of elder things.
So that was sort of a warning, like if these things are kind of like mocking, and then the really OG, the original G is gonna come and wipe them out again like they did in the past. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to be, it's like when you think about a war, like nobody thinks about all the birds and squirrels that got killed, right? That would be the humans, right? No, they're not going to come out and try to wipe us out. What do they care?
Yeah.
But if they come to wipe these things out, we're just going to be a byproduct.
Yes. Speaking of influences, man, it's cold in here. This book above, I think maybe this book and Cthulhu, because like everybody knows Cthulhu. There's friggin' plushies of Cthulhu. What people don't understand is the influence that this book has had on movies and other books. If it weren't for this book, we wouldn't have The Thing from Another World, which was in the 50s, that then got made into John Carpenter's The Thing, which for me was the last movie I saw that scared the crap out of me. And it's heavily influenced right down to the ending of the movie being like, as much as they tried to keep that monster contained in that, and it's in Antarctica too. No matter how hard they try to keep it, the search and rescue team's going to show up and that's why they fit the Thing into Carpenter's apocalyptic trilogy, because it's the end of the world. Um, which also that was taken from a short story called "Who Goes There," written by John W. Campbell, which was written like because of Mountains of Madness, and then it's been that everybody who has read like horror has usually found a copy of Who Goes There, and there's all kinds of Frozen Hell was actually the name of the book before it became Who Goes There, but there's all kinds of Frozen Hell, all kinds of apocalyptic movies out there that borrow heavily from Madness.
Nice.
So, any last thoughts? Would you recommend this book to people? How about that?
Yeah, I would recommend. So I read it like 5 different ways. I started reading this,
Uh-huh.
and the issue is the lighting in our house is not conducive to reading physical books.
Right.
Plus, I like to read before I go to sleep when I'm laying in bed. So I got the Kindle version. It cost 58 cents, I think. So
As well it should, because it's in the public domain, kids.
I figure I paid a little bit for the bandwidth to download it from Amazon, but
Yeah.
and I was up against a deadline because I had to have it done by today, right? So I went on YouTube and found an Audible version from Horror Babble.
Yeah.
Horror. I like to
Ian
say
Gordon's
horror.
Babble.
Horror Babble. Which I told you about, and you're like, well, here's another one that I like, and I liked that one better.
Yeah.
Horror Babble was, what's his name? Ian Green? He's
Ian
British,
Gordon.
Ian Gordon, British dude.
Yeah.
Reading it, which was fine, but this other one was awesome.
Yeah.
The what's the one that it was like the original book on tape.
Yeah. Yes, it literally was a book on tape. Yes.
That somebody ripped onto YouTube. What's that guy's name? Do you remember?
That was Conrad Fettinger.
Conrad Fettinger.
Yeah.
It was somebody in the YouTube comment said, it feels like I'm huddled around the radio with my family listening to this,
Yeah, yeah. Or as I described it as, you find a bunch of reel-to-reel audio that's been lost for years, and you're playing it. And
found footage. This would work
yes.
really well as a found footage, and I don't know if anybody's done it or if they're planning to do it or whatever. I saw Guillermo del Toro's thinking about making a movie.
He's been trying to make that movie for a long time. Yeah,
it would be a great found footage, like the Blair Witch Project, right? Where for the movie you don't do the reveal. It's more like we found these because these guys make it out alive because it's first person and he's telling us. Like, okay, we made it out. Now let me go back and tell you what happened. So would I recommend it? I think I would ask the person, like, do you enjoy sort of this dense, like, what did you call it? Purple prose. And if the answer is no, then I would be like, go to the YouTube. Yeah. You'll love that.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Has a lot of great ideas. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely would recommend it. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. Well, spoiler, so would I.
And you did.
I did. All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I want to thank my buddy Steve for putting up with this frigid temperature while we record this episode.
Supposed to get up to 15 below today.
Oh man, I'm breaking out my Crocs and my long baggy shorts.
Nice.
If you want to see more of Steve and I and our reviews of stuff, let us know down below. Check out At the Mountains of Madness. You can find it literally anywhere. It's free most places online because, like I said, I think all of Lovecraft stuff is in the public domain now, except for maybe his letters. But most of all, thanks for watching.